Ain't it good to know you got a friend? This might be your first time here at this congregation. And there are different kinds of friends, but I hope you know that you might find a spiritual friend here, a helping hand, someone who you can call when the clouds feel gray and stormy. You've got a friend. As Unitarian Universalists, we pride ourselves on caring about relationships, about understanding ourselves as those who are interconnected with all of life and with each other. It's in this way that, in my opinion, we understand ourselves as incredibly caring people. What do you think? Yes? The last time I was here was for Linda Safian's memorial service. And I saw and I felt the warmth of this community in that sweet remembrance. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what community means to us as Unitarian Universalists, and how we come together and how we refuse to abandon one another. I've had the delight and the privilege of being a parish minister, and also now as a community minister, as the director and co-collaborator with so many wonderful leaders, including pen pals who are in this room, pen pal leaders like Paul Safian, and steering committee members, Karen Quiche, who's coming off of the steering committee but will not be a stranger to us in our organization. And so many of you who have supported our ministries that began with the idea that we refuse to abandon those who are incarcerated in Illinois. And that those relationships, that those people who are locked up matter. And so our inside members, over 125 in Illinois, have felt the love and care from this congregation. Just this morning, Lucas showed me a letter that, who was it? It was Reggie, that Reggie wrote to him about how much he appreciated the article that was included in the newsletter that went inside to our members. It's these connections that can be a ray of hope, almost like that face in the mirror image. That reminder of care and connection that means so much to all of us, right? We all want to feel connected in some kind of way. Now, Monica Cosby, I'll show the picture here, is a leader, she's a scholar, she's an activist, and she's a grandmother, a fierce grandmother. And she has been part of the Unitarian Universalist Prison Ministry since we began. And not only does she remind us that solidarity is a gift, that it's a gift to show up for one another, it's a privilege to be caring and cared for, but she is the one who coined the phrase, refuse to abandon. Because as she wrote in a chapter that's from a really wonderful book called Let This Radicalize You by Miriam Kaba and Kelly Hayes, she writes about how in prison, particularly at Logan Women's Prison, there's a huge culture of community, and that it's intensely important to one's survival, and that there would be days when it would be worth it to make a face at the corrections officer, even like a silly face, like to do something like that, and get a ticket and a fine or be thrown into solitary confinement, because it would make another fellow person who was locked up smile or laugh. Or to save each other's pennies so that Esmeralda could have her coffee in the morning because it was so part of her mental health care routine, but she had run out of money. That kind of care and consideration was just part of how people survive in prison. And so Monica reminds us all to refuse to abandon one another, no matter how hard we struggle. And there were people who saved her life there. People who knew when she was on the edge of making a decision that would be final, that they would stay with her, sit with her through the night, because community can save lives. We know this through Pride Month, when we talk about, as people of faith, how important it is to show up and be present to ourselves, whether we identify as LGBTQIA+ or not, that presence can be salvific, that we refuse to abandon one another in the wake of anti-trans rhetoric that is out there right now. The legislation, that we show up and that it is a gift. So there are so many barriers to connection, and of course in prison ministry I can tell you there are many that are physical. I'll show you the next picture. But I do have the opportunity very often, this is from last summer, to visit my friend Lonnie and to go to Stateville and now we can spend almost 3 hours together, having snacks from the commissary, connecting, talking about theology, talking about prison abolition, and talking about the world we dream of, our heart's desires. And for Lonnie, what he wants people to know about in particular is about the fact that he's a human being, but also that there is something he is experiencing that many people experience in Illinois through long-term sentences, and that's death by incarceration. Now, Illinois abolished the death penalty some time ago, and yet at the same time, due to very harsh sentences, people are locked up or have stacking charges and they have natural life without parole, and there is no mechanism in the state by which someone, after serving for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, can have any kind of formal review to see if someone might be ready to return into outside community. Imagine how hard that must feel to know that there may be no way out ever. And all of that goes to show that these systems are not created to correct, to rehabilitate, to assist those who have deep needs and struggles, but instead that prisons are made to isolate and to punish. Now, the social geographer Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who I feel like I'm always quoting, she talks about how prison abolition is not about just tearing down policing in prisons, but instead it's about the building up of life-affirming institutions. It's about being present to one another so that people can have their needs met, whatever those needs might be. And as we learn more and more about there are so many needs to be met, whether it's meeting the needs around people who have disabilities, meeting the needs of folks who have generally been pushed out to the margins, however it is that we can find ways to meet those needs, and also basic needs like education and housing and mental health care, physical health care, heck, even dental care, vision care while I'm at it. Let's keep the dreams alive for all of these needs to be met. Death by incarceration is something that we as an organization have decided to continue to campaign against. And part of what we understand here is that we are trying as an organization to get people out. And we work with pen pals who are inside to talk about different ways and strategies we can work on that. It might be through legislative advocacy. It might be through short-term solutions, like helping our pen pals who need petitions for clemency to be filled out, which are actually huge books and reams of paper and packets. Or perhaps it's to apply for medical release for someone, which has been working slightly for some people who are at death's door and can be released after some intense procedure to make that happen. So we have short-term goals as well as long-term goals of working towards this world we dream of, our heart's desire, where we look at not only what's happening now, but ways to prevent violence from happening in the future. And that is actually what we talk about when we talk about transformative justice, that it's not just about creating ways that people can come together to heal a relationship or a harm that has happened, but to begin to also look at why is harm happening at all? Why is this happening? We'll go to the next slide. So this is Patrice. He's someone who helped work with me on planning this service. He is the one who wanted us to sing the song, "You've Got a Friend," and to share that. And one of the things, and he's surrounded by me and by another leader who's on our advisory council, Megan Selby, who's affiliated with Second Unitarian. And one of the things he reminds us of is that people need to see the humanity of people who are in prison. And every time I see him, every time we write, he always closes with, "Please just make sure they understand that I am a human being, that I'm not a number, but that I'm human." And part of what we are doing with Patrice is trying to find ways to get legislators to get together with folks who are inside and to meet them. So I actually brought my state senator, Laura Fine, I live in Evanston, to meet Lonnie, because Lonnie is my pen pal, and she sat with him for 2 hours and listened to his story and his hopes that she would support elder parole, which is one way that we could start creating parole and bring that back to Illinois. For Patrice, he is still waiting for Reps Kelly Cassidy and Senator Mike Simmons to come visit him, and we're hoping that also Senator Ventura, who's in Illinois, will visit, in Joliet, Illinois, will come and visit him as well. I just recently came back from a visit with Patrice, where he had the, visiting him is sort of like sitting with a monk. So it's like entering into sacred time. And I had just come that morning from my children being in the kitchen, making lemonade in the kitchen for a lemonade stand for summer. And it was this beautiful, idyllic experience. My floor was sticky with their efforts. And I knew they were going to go out and just be on the corner, safe and sound, basically harassing anyone who came by to buy lemonade. And to go from this idyllic setting to going through the barriers that I had to go to just to visit him only hours later. The dissonance of knowing that he was in shackles before he came out to visit me, because when people are moved, they are shackled. The dissonance of that place and how difficult it is just to see a loved one. He wanted me to highlight that for you today. That we're living in a world of dissonance and that we can refuse to abandon one another and instead to still just weave our lives together somehow. So I'm here to encourage you that if you haven't, to get a pen pal. There are pen pals who are here who have made visits. I've had opportunities to go with others. If you need extra support to make visits, to visit your pen pal, if you have one, we're here to support you in that. We'll go to the next slide. Here's the picture of State Senator Laura Fine and me. She had the opportunity to actually sign up like a normal person has to, which is generally every time you want to visit a loved one, you have to fill out a very long, detailed list to go to Stateville in particular. The barriers are great, and it's hard to stay connected for people who are locked up and people and loved ones on the outside. We heard in the story with Queenie about how far away she is from her mother, how they have to take a bus and a train just to get to the jail to visit. The barriers are great, and yet we refuse to abandon one another. And we'll go to the next slide. And this is a picture of Akil. And Akil is someone who I am so glad to say is released, and he is an imam. He became a Muslim imam when he was locked up. And this is him and me when he was preaching this January, only like 6 weeks after he had gotten out. He came and he shared with the congregation at Second Unitarian Church. And Akil has a lot of really wonderful things to say, and I hope someday maybe he'll come and be at the Rock. But he says this: Allah in the Holy Quran says, "Verily, oppression is worse than slaughter. The real death by incarceration is not the pine box, but the suppression of all that it means to be human." Are you detecting the theme about us lifting up each other's humanity, showing up for each other as spiritual companions and friends, that we might align ourselves together in a vision of a repaired world, that tikkun olam. So I heard from, when I was working with Patrice on this service, I couldn't help but think about those lyrics from You've Got a Friend. Having been locked up since 1995. So here are the lyrics again. Ain't it good to know that you've got a friend when people can be so cold? They'll hurt you, yes, desert you, and they'll take your soul if you let them. Oh, but don't you let them. Dear ones, we can't let them. We must hold on to all of our souls for dear life, and that we refuse to abandon, and as such, we begin to form an organized presence of congregational life, of building connections, honoring transitions, making spiritual friends, honoring the best of what it means to be human, where no one is disposable and everybody has a place to lean on when you're weary. I mean, heck, you've got this rock here. That this could be a place for you that's solid as a rock when everything else is changing and overwhelming, and when the sky and the clouds are troubled. A place where you can hold on to until the storm passes over. Ain't it good to know that you have this church? That it ain't perfect, but it's filled with precious, fallible humans. That this is a community that makes space for someone to come and talk about prisoners and prisoner solidarity. That it's a community where you get to learn and grow. And that you, as you gather together, become something more than the sum of its parts. And that your organized presence can be part of helping the repair of the world to a world of salam, a vision of heaven on earth through community. This is the power that we possess, and I hope that we can dance in the heat of that power, and I hope you dance in the heat of that power this summer, through the whole summer. And with UU Prison Ministry of Illinois, we invite you to expand your sense of community. And I give thanks to all of those who are part of the leadership of our organization, who have done so much to organize a Unitarian Universalist presence at Cook County Jail, and also at Logan Women's Prison, and also through the Pen Pal program, which is in all the prisons, federal and state in Illinois. And perhaps this is a time, as you sit with your heart's desire, to hold up the mirror so that you can see a friend, and that we can visibilize those who are locked up. This, as my friend Lonnie writes, is what builds community in reflections of a mirrored life. May it be so. Amen.